Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another weekly fighting roundup. And so if you're new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into it. So of course, starting off with the boxing news, and Kakache has called out Wood. I think that is an excellent fight, to be completely honest. Obviously, perhaps it's keeping the whole world away from them titles, with Kakache only, of course, fighting Joe Cordina, which of course was an excellent victory, but then also Josh Warrington, which was a very good win still, but if he goes on to fight somebody like a Lee Wood, it's huge domestic fight, and I mean, if it was in the UK, it would be massive. But it is, like I say, keeping the world away from the titles a little bit, and perhaps keeping other top contenders that are perhaps with other promotions not about. But it would be really nice to see Lee Wood back in the ring also. So yeah, I think it would be a great fight. Just perhaps it'd be interesting to see what kind of show it'd be on. If it'd be on a Riyadh season one, or if it'd be on a Matchroom one. Hickey will fight October 19th. Melikuziev versus Stevens, Fundora versus Alanis, Fulcum versus Pearson, and Iriarte will fight November 2nd. Alish has joined Wasserman. Alish will fight Bukzi Skij October 25th. Isley will fight Howard November 8th. Undisputed was released, so that is the kind of boxing game. From the looks of things, it doesn't look awful. It doesn't look as bad as some of the boxing games look, but I mean, for 70 quid, I ain't getting it for myself. DAZN have partnered with that prize guy. WO have ordered Janabek versus Shiraz, so that's going to be interesting because, of course, the EBU ordered Shiraz versus Bentley, and perhaps that might be an easier fight to be made, but I'm sure His Excellency would rather Janabek versus Shiraz. So, like I say, now they've both been ordered, it's going to be interesting to see which one gets agreed upon. IBF have ordered Bicoli versus Caballero, so that's a final eliminator for Dubois' belt. I think that would be excellent, to be honest. A great fight, and a fight that realistically makes sense. Obviously, everybody would have loved to see Zhang versus Bicoli, and perhaps we might still will see it. But like I said, I think Bicoli versus Caballero is still a great fight. Bahachuk versus Madrimov, Itoma versus McKean, Fisher versus Allen, McCann versus McGrail, and Lowe versus McGregor will fight December 21st. Perhaps not as big of an undercard as the first Fury versus Usyk card was, but Bahachuk versus Madrimov I think will be an excellent stylistic fight. And I really like how though they both lost versus two of the best fighters around currently, they have still both been given great opportunities because of their performances and how well they performed, which I really like and really appreciate to see. Itoma getting a real step up, which is going to be very interesting to see. Fisher versus Allen is just kind of a nice fun fight where realistically Fisher should win relatively comfortably, I believe. McCann versus McGregor I think is an excellent European fight, and Lowe versus McGregor isn't a bad fight in itself as well. It's going to be interesting to see how McGregor is. I believe he has been kind of away on the small halls, but is his back return to the bigger stage, and last time of course it didn't go so well. Moving on, Benavidez has agreed to fight Morel. That's kind of come as a surprise. It seemed like he was going to fight Hart in December, but all of a sudden he kind of announced on his Instagram that he's agreed to fight. There has been no date or location or anything like that announced yet, but that is an excellent fight, and I can't really wait to see it. Rocha will fight Carrillo December 14th. Spence has agreed to fight Fundora, so we're kind of waiting for Fundora to be granted the fight and allowed to have a fight, a defense, or before fighting Crawford basically. So if Spence beats Fundora, then we're back to basically square one where Spence is being ordered to fight Crawford again. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But I just want to see a Spence return, to be completely honest. Kelly is rumoured to fight Charlo December 14th. Matchroom have released Matthias, which I think is crazy, to be completely honest. I mean, he got brought in as such a big name. Obviously, he did go to lose to Liam Paro, and it wasn't perhaps the best of losses, but nonetheless, there's a lot of Puerto Rican talent in the Matchroom stable, and just for them to kind of get rid of Matthias, Matthias still could have headlined and still could have got back to a high level, but now he's been released, he probably, even if he does get back to a high level, probably not going to want to join Matchroom again, which is relatively interesting to see how they just released him like that. But Junior will fight November 8th, Aziz will fight Edmondson October 19th. Matchroom's prize fighter tournament is off, which is a real shame, to be honest, because I was really invested in the tournament and here for it, but I just don't think it got the financial backing, or I don't know, I just don't think it brought in the views in which perhaps they thought it would have. So yeah, it's off. But Pauls is set to fight Conway next. So Conway, of course, was meant to fight McKenna, but now he's going to probably fight Pauls on a Matchroom card. So nonetheless, it's still a good fight, and if it goes off anything that Pauls has had in his previous 2 fights with Heaney, I think it'd be an excellent fight. Gilly vs Green is off, and of course Gilly is now fighting McCann this week. BBB have ordered Masood versus Miller. Sukita won via unanimous decision versus Nakazato. Miyazato won via TK round 1 versus Fujimoto. Kamimura won by unanimous decision versus Huang Q. Go won by unanimous decision versus Al Dia. Hanada drew versus Kibido. Mandakoro won by unanimous decision versus Kamik. Yabuki won by TKO in round 9 versus Nonchinger to become IBF World Light Flyweight Champion. And I got my prediction wrong. I thought that Nonchinger's ability and actual skills in which he does have would be able to push through. I think he is still a very skilled fighter. I do just genuinely think that the big stoppage did affect him, and Ibuki's pressure perhaps brought on them memories, and he was trying to be as defensive as he was in that last fight versus Carrillo, but it just didn't work, and he couldn't go the same way and push the same way, and he did get damaged and he did get schooled realistically, and he got hurt. And it wasn't a very, resounding performance by Nonchinger. He looked good at certain bits, but Yabuki's pressure and his kind of coming forward style was just too much. And I don't necessarily know if Nonchinger is going to be able to get back to the top. I think he's going to get more opportunities. It's going to be interesting to see if Matchroom are willing to give him them opportunities in a light flyweight division where perhaps it's not really got the best of talent currently. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Maybe he'll move up after this. Nicholson won by unanimous decision versus Chapman. Whitaker drew versus Cameron. Alakel won by unanimous decision versus Gonzalez. Nicholson won by unanimous decision versus Chapman to remain WBC World Heavyweight Champion. Wardley won by TKO round 1 versus Clark to remain British and Commonwealth Heavyweight Champion. Eubank Jr. won by KO in round 7 versus Saramenta to become RBO World Middleweight Champion. Optai won via TKO round 6 versus Massey to remain IBF World Cruiserweight Champion. Beterbiev won via majority decision versus Bivol to become RBF, RBO, WBC, WBA and WBO World Light Heavyweight Champion. And to speak about this monster of a Riyadh season card, which really did deliver, realistically, they all kind of have delivered. And I wasn't too sure about some of the matchups, if they would gel or, if there'd be mismatches or if they would really put on good performances. But Whitaker versus Cameron was an interesting one. I mean, I don't realistically think you can give that last round as a 10-10 round and as a draw. So perhaps Cameron is a little bit hard done to with not getting the win for that one. But, the whole kind of over the ropes thing, people saying that Whitaker's team told Whitaker to stay down. Whitaker did look a bit off. He just wasn't kind of moving the same way in which he used to, and perhaps has found a level in which, maybe it's not his level, but maybe it's a level in which he has to have a couple fights around to be able to find success and be able to get through it, and then he's not just going to be able to blitz through it anymore, and perhaps he is overlooking his opponents. But fair play to Cameron. The story in which he's had is incredible, and now he's got a signing with Queensberry as well, just announced today, so yeah, he's really doing well for himself, and fair play to him. Nicholson, that unanimous decision versus Chapman, it's not ever really going to be the most entertaining of performances when you kind of see Nicholson in, she'll put on a little bit of a show moving around, she'll show good movement and maybe show a little bit of a dance at the end, but it's never going to be it's never going to be like a Taylor Serrano and anything like that, and perhaps that's what Riyadh season is wanting or needing from the women's fights, because I think a lot of people did kind of click off for that one, but I thought that Chapman would win. Nicholson again put on a very good boxing display and moved very well and was just able to keep Chapman at a distance. And to be honest, there's not really many other fighters in which featherweight-wise are going to be able to match that. Of course, unless she fights Serrano, but she's kind of in her own path in a different place. So I don't really think their paths are going to cross. So Nicholson, I think, has to fight Brown next, but I don't necessarily know if that would be any difference. Nicholson's style is going to probably be a longevity type style, and if she can keep that cardio up and that movement up, it's going to be difficult for any opponent to really put on a pressure performance and be able to find success. Wardley, that TKO was scary from Clark. I thought Clark was going to be able to win, to be honest. I thought his boxing ability going into the later rounds would prevail and would be too much, and he would be able to continuously catch Clark up with Wardley with the uppercut, in which he did in the first fight, but wow, Wardley put on that power early, and Clark, of course, turned his back. The ref didn't do anything about it, and if the ref doesn't, then you can't really complain. And it was a bad injury. It looked horrible, dislocated jaw, bulging out his head. But nonetheless, fair play to Wardley. That scary type of power, showing that he is levels above realistically and has that level of power to match it with the top guys. And it's going to be very interesting to see where he progresses onto next. like I've been saying, there is a gap between the top heavyweights and the heavyweights that are just kind of fringe level. When you see Moses Atama kind of breaching into that fight to McKean, I think that is a great fight and a fight in which Wardley could have had realistically. So it's going to be interesting to see where Wardley gets progressed onto next. I'm not too sure, to be completely honest. People are saying Joe Joyce. I think he's levels above Joe Joyce, just in my opinion. Moving on, Eubank Jr., he did get hurt a little bit in that first round versus Saramenta, and I think he was just trying to show off a bit too much, trying to make it a bit too easy, trying to do what he always does, and did get caught. And I think perhaps that's the reason why he wanted to have this fight, to just, make it so he's not doing any more silly things. But in the end, he did look good. He was picking his shots nicely in the end, and kind of a vintage Eubank Jr. performance when he got into his rhythm and got into his groove. And then, of course, he did his face-off versus Ben, which will probably be the fight which happens next. Weird that Neymar was just kind of stood in the middle, but nonetheless, that probably sets up that fight now. You can kind of see that there is a little bit of, it's not, I don't know, it's weird because when they're doing the face-off, Eubank and Ben, you can tell it's not pure animosity because they're not really pushing, they're not really shoving. I think they're getting told to be respectful and being told that if they do kind of do anything like that, then they're going to just get punished. But, nonetheless, Eubank, Ben, they're both going to say a lot, and it probably wouldn't make sense for a fight, everything that's happened with Conor Ben, but also at the same time, it seems like Riyadh Season isn't really too afraid about giving Drugs Cheats another chance, of course, after what happened with Jerome Miller, and of course the fact that Conor Ben hasn't actually been proved guilty. So yeah, it's a whole thing, but I think Eubank Jr. Ben probably will end up happening. Opetaia Massey, got my prediction right for that one, got my prediction right for the Eubank one as well, but Opetaia Massey, great performance by Opetaia. Every time he's had a fight in which perhaps has been against a bit of a lower level opponent or a bit of a lesser world level opponent, he's proven that he's levels above. He did it versus Thompson, he did it versus Zorro, and now he's done it again versus Jack Massey. Jack Massey is a very tough guy, and Joe Parker couldn't get him out, and that was at a weight where he wasn't even comfortable, Jack Massey. But Opetaia put out a vintage performance. His jab is so strong, his shots are just really well placed, and his movement is excellent. He is just levels above these kind of British Commonwealth fighters in that of Jack Massey, and now I think I would love to see him in the winner of Billam Smith versus Zeta Ramirez. I think it would make for an excellent fight, and it kind of has to happen. And now, he's been talking about going up and fighting Bivol or beterbiev, but of course they're probably going to rematch. So, another fight at cruiserweight I don't think would hurt him at all, and against another one of the top guys going for unification, I think him versus Zeta Ramirez would be a great fight, of course, if he gets through Billam Smith, which will be a tough test for Zeta. And then, of course, beterbiev Bivol. A lot of people call him robbery on this one. I'm never really a fan of when people call robbery, to be completely honest. I think it's just a close fight. It's not a robbery if it's a close fight. It's just kind of the way that you see it. But Bivol was having a lot of success on the back foot, and beterbiev wasn't really being able to react to a lot of Bivol's movement. I really respect Bivol for standing toe-to-toe a lot of the time and kind of taking beterbiev's power and showing that perhaps he's not as scary as what everybody said he is. But beterbiev, that aggression, he pushed through with it, did some of the things in which you have to do against tricky opponents, standing on the front foot and things like that. But beterbiev, I wasn't sure if he was able to last a full 12-round distance at such a high pace, but it was an excellent fight. It was an amazing fight, realistically. Like I say, fought at such a high pace. There's going to be a rematch made. His Excellency really wants it. You can kind of see that straight away after the bell, after the announcement of the result, that he's kind of saying to Bivol that there's going to be a rematch and everything like that. And I think it makes complete sense. And I think it was kind of made to be an excellent fight. I got my prediction wrong for it. I thought that Bivol would win by unanimous decision, but nonetheless, like I say, excellent performance from both, and it's two styles that just gelled, and a lot of credit to both. And yeah, just an excellent performance, living up to the Riyadh season billing yet again. Moving on, Sato Drew versus Sato. Iwata won by a TKO in round 3 versus Noriega to become WBO World Light Flyweight Champion. Taraji won via TKO in round 11 versus Rosales to become WBC World Flyweight Champion. Akui won via split decision versus Sharonfak to remain WBA World Flyweight Champion. Tsutsumi won via unanimous decision versus Inoue to become WBA World Bantamweight Champion. And to speak about this card, I'm not going to speak about the other Japanese card because of course that was today, which is going to go into next week's thing. But You know, both of these cards have been great events, great shows. I really hope the Top Rank does this again, because there is enough talent in Japan for them to really do that. I mean, they could even get Ibuki now to come and fight, of course, after what happens. So, you know, they're great events. I love them a lot. You know, mid of the day, just boxing on a Sunday and a Monday. Who's not going to love that? But nonetheless, great performances from all. To go through my predictions, how I did with them, I got my prediction wrong. Noriega did, you know, come out swinging, come out early with the aggressive style, the bullish style in which he tries to have. But Iwata landed a very good shot and then was able to capitalise on it and pick the shots really nicely. He's always had that power. I'm still not too sure about him in the light flyweight division as a champion, but like I say, it's difficult with the light flyweight division because a lot of fighters have recently just moved up. There's not really that many fighters available in the light flyweight division, so unless he goes on to fight Ibuki, then other than that, I don't think there's many huge names. But Noriega did get hurt with that and get punished with that style, and you know, that's the catching a kind of force in which he was going in with. He was probably going to get hurt badly if he was going to get caught, and he did. And that's kind of Spanish boxing, still not yet again having much success at the moment. Taraji, moving up, managed to do it this time, managed to become that flyweight champion, and against the Rosales, who perhaps could have been tricky, and I mean was tricky to be completely honest. He did have Taraji stumbling at one point. I don't necessarily know if he was hurt or not, but he had him stumbling, he had him spinning around, and Rosales just wasn't able to really capitalise. Taraji went back to his boxing very nicely afterwards and was kind of doing his moving in and out style, was going to the head, go to the body really nicely and setting up them shots very well, and in general was putting on a good display. I think sometimes with Taraji you don't necessarily know how the fight's going to go. It's normally an entertaining fight when he's in it, and yet again it was. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how he goes if he goes to try and fight the other champions in the flyweight division, because he's definitely there to make a bigger name for himself and to be a main event kind of guy. But it's just going to be interesting to see which champions that he's going to try and pick out and try and go for, because perhaps I don't necessarily know how his power is at this weight. You know, he looked good, he cracked Rosales' nose, but I'm just not too sure as of yet. And then Akui versus Sharumfak. Akui, still not massive on him. I got my prediction right for this one, I believe. Taraji got that right, and then yeah, Noriega got that one wrong. But yeah, Akui, I mean, like I said, I'm not too sure about him as of yet, and Sharumfak had a lot of success from kind of late mid to late rounds, and really got back into the fight when he actually got to his boxing and was able to have a lot of success there. And Akui, you know, won the early rounds relatively comfortably. You know, perhaps it wouldn't have been a split decision, it still should have been a unanimous, but I think he struggled with Sharumfak a bit, and like I say, I think in this flyweight division, with the likes of a Taraji coming up, with, you know, the other champions around, I think it's a really interesting division currently. And you know, obviously the likes of like Olascuga are still about, and Bomba Gonzalez, they of course might rematch after what happened. But yeah, I think it's an interesting division. I'm just not sure how long Akui can last as a champion, but nonetheless he managed to get a win, and so yeah, credit to him. And then Satsumi versus Inoue was a great fight. Inoue was countering well, landing well in the early rounds, but then Satsumi really brought on the pace into the later rounds and really was putting on Inoue, and he hurt Inoue, of course, and you know, perhaps he was shoving him about a little bit and pushed him onto the ropes, and you know, maybe that was what caused the knockdown. But nonetheless, he did really land good shots when he got that knockdown, and so I don't really think Inoue can dispute that much. But I got my prediction right. I think I said that Satsumi would stop him. Of course, he kind of almost did, but yeah, really put on a front foot, come forwards performance that was just too much for Inoue in this point in his career. I think Inoue is still developing, and this was a bit of a tough ask for him. But you know, as a world champion, you have to be taking these tough tests. But now he's that bantamweight champion, and of course, it kind of perhaps rules out the fight for Nakatani and Inoue. Perhaps we could still see it as a defense, but Satsumi now has a lot of available kind of options there, and perhaps he might go on to fight Nakatani. I think that would make for an excellent fight. But yeah, full credit to him, has really built himself a name onto this platform now, and yeah, there's been a few upsets and you know, on these Japanese fight nights, and you know, perhaps a few people were saying that they weren't evenly matched and things like that, but I think it's made for great fights, a lot of them. His Excellency wants to make Bivol versus beterbiev too, like I mentioned. Nicholson says she has to face Brown next, also like I mentioned, and Cully has called out Padley. Moving on also to a bit more of the boxing news. Chaparro won via TK round 1 versus Kirkwood. Rosado Ortiz won via unanimous decision versus Lamelli. Cordoba won via unanimous decision versus Barnes. Flores won via unanimous decision versus Rosario. Rivera won via unanimous decision versus Beltran. And to move on now to the MMA news, Page will fight Condit in a grappling match. Thought I'd mention it. Obviously, it's Michael Venom Page. It's a big name, even if it is just a grappling match. But he's there to improve his grappling. I respect him for wanting that test. Mohammed versus Rakhmonov. Pantoja versus Asakura, Garn versus Volkov 2, and Luque versus Diaz will fight December 7th. I think that is a good card. I mean, Mohammed versus Rakhmonov, I mean, a lot of people are saying Mohammed is kind of doomed already, but I think it could make for an interesting contest. Pantoja versus Asakura is a very interesting one. It shows perhaps the state of the flyweight division. Obviously, what happened with the fights on the weekend, which we're going to talk about in a minute, may have affected who fought this one, but Asakura is a big name in Japan, and as a Ryzen champion, is going to bring a lot of attention from Ryzen fans over to the UFC. It's interesting to see that they didn't want to kind of put on the event in Japan or anything like that and make that the main attraction, because, like I say, Asakura has a lot of a big enough fan base to do so, but it's his first UFC fight, and he's straight away fighting Pantoja. Perhaps I don't mind that. Maybe it means that other champions from other divisions are going to, from other organisations are going to start just suddenly getting jumped into title fights. I don't know how much I enjoy that, but it does show, like I said, the state of the flyweight division currently is a bit of an interesting position. So they wanted somebody new, and it's going to be a very interesting fight, I think, and a fight which definitely shouldn't be slept on. Garn vs Volkov 2, I believe that was meant to happen next weekend or on the Holloway undercard, but obviously now it's been pushed back a little bit. And then Luque vs Diaz. Nick Diaz is back, and it's going to be interesting to see. I don't even know why he's returned, to be completely honest. Moving on, Carpenter won by submission round 2 versus Rocha. Haddam won by decision versus Argueta. Polastri won by decision versus McKenna. Taffa won by AK in round 2 versus Sharaf. Garimbo won by decision versus Price. Sabatini won by submission in round 1 versus Pierce. Tamirov won by AK in round 1 versus Vergara. Rodriguez won by decision versus Morono. Dawson won by AK in round 2 versus Garcia. Jua Kwani won by decision versus Gooden. Jun Yong won by decision versus Tavares. Royval won by decision versus Tyra. And just to mainly kind of speak about the main event, I thought that Tyra perhaps would have been able to submit Royval, and there was times in which he had Royval in bad positions, but I don't think Royval's, I suppose, scramble was as good as it was, and Tyra getting brought into the later rounds, he got hurt at times on the feet. I thought that Royval's high output might make Tyra struggle, and I think it did. I think Tyra's striking is still a little bit limited and has still got a bit of a low output, and Tyra perhaps got shown up for his grappling. I think he's creative with his attempts, but I think he's still a bit limited. He always loves his body triangles, and perhaps he was using that a bit too much in certain positions and wasn't kind of utilising the length in which Royval is. And, it's tough. I think Tyra is going to come back. He definitely showed a lot of heart. I just, like I say, I think he struggled going into the later rounds. Royval puts together some nice combinations and did enough in the end to be able to get the win. And I think perhaps it could have been a more unanimous type victory in my opinion. But like I say, it was still a very close fight in the end. And Royval, like I say, doesn't really make the flyweight division much more entertaining because of what happened with Tyra. Not like he was the new guy coming through and he could have made a world title kind of push afterwards, but obviously he didn't. And now we've got Royval again, still #1 contender. Who's he going to fight? I'm not got a clue. Maybe the winner of Alblasi versus Moreno, but we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. And like I say, I think Tyra will come again, just maybe needs to just keep developing, I think. And then McGregor said he's fighting Hooker. In some strange interview, McGregor was saying a lot of things, of course, as he always is. But Hooker was named, and he named February 1st as a date for that. So you never know. I don't even think it's been agreed by the UFC, but Dan Hooker would be an excellent fight, to be honest. I think Dan Hooker would really put it on him, and I think it would be a very tough test for McGregor, possibly tougher than that of Chandler, in my opinion. But yeah, that's it for today's video. I hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.